everyone, and welcome back to my channel, RPG Retro Reviews. This is Captain Courageous, and I want to thank everyone for their kind comments and suggestions. This video is part 2 of a 4-part series on how to play Dungeons & Dragons. In part 1, the introduction, I talked about what a role-playing game was and gave a basic overview of the Dungeons & Dragons game. If you haven't watched that video, you might want to click the link here and check it out, as a lot of the terms I use in this part are explained in the first part. In this video, part 2, I'm going to talk about how to create your first Dungeons & Dragons character and walk you through the basic steps. Everyone ready? Alright, let's get started. Creating a character is a relatively simple process. In the Dungeons & Dragons game, how this is done is detailed in the player's handbook. While the book is thick, you don't really need to read any of it to begin playing, and if you do read it, you'll probably just start consulting sections that pertain to your character alone. While this is a rule book, it is also a reference work in that it contains lists of things, lists of races to play, lists of character professions called your character class, what skills and spells she might know, and so on. Thus, if your character is an elf, you should read the section on elves. You don't really need to know anything about the other races like half-orcs or dragonborn. In fact, this ignorance of the rules is what makes early play a lot of fun. You can learn about the other races and monsters through the course of playing the game. You see, your character starts off relatively weak and unfamiliar with the world around them, and then, through experience, becomes more powerful and knowledgeable. So too it is with your understanding of the rules. As you play, you become more and more familiar with the rules of the game and the campaign world that your character inhabits. To create your character, first get an idea of who you would like to play. This is your character concept. A detailed concept will lead to long-lasting characters that you potentially play for years. Someone that you will grow to care about. As a new player, a good starting point is adventure movies and novels. Perhaps you want to play a lovable scoundrel like Han Solo, or a warrior princess like Xena, or a wizard like Gandalf. These are just broad generalizations, but they are starting points, and from there you can flesh out the details and make the character your own by adding quirks and personality traits and backgrounds. Your DM can help you with this by giving you some basic information about the game world your character lives in. There are 6 basic statistics that help define your character's attributes. They are rated between 3, which is very poor, and 18, which is relative to Olympic level of ability. In general, ability scores are created by rolling 3 6-sided dice and adding them together, though your DM will most likely have a specific method they prefer. Rolling 4 dice and keeping the 3 highest scores is a very common method. Also, using a standard array of common abilities is also quite favorable, which is what we will be using in this demonstration. Alright, let's look at the ability scores. They are Strength. This is a measure of your character's ability to hit hard and perform feats of strength like busting down doors or lifting heavy objects. Characters with a high strength score can hit easier with their sword and do more damage. Dexterity. This defines how agile and nimble your character is. Characters with a high dexterity score are good at firing their bow, using stealth to sneak past guards, or even picking pockets. Intelligence. This is a rating of your character's IQ, or just how smart she is. Characters with a high intelligence are good at analyzing and solving puzzles and make great spellcasters. Wisdom. This is a measure of your character's common sense and willpower. Characters with a high wisdom are good at giving advice and perceiving danger. Constitution. This is a measure of your character's health and stamina. Characters with a high constitution can take more damage in combat and can better withstand the effects of venom and poisons. Charisma. This is a measure of your character's force of personality, their leadership ability, and to some extent, their physical attractiveness. Characters with high charisma scores make great party leaders, are skilled in social situations, and make great performers. Conversely, characters with low charisma scores are not good in social situations and frequently annoy other characters, even those members of their own party. Once you've created your 6 ability scores, you apply them to the characteristic you like based on the role you intend to play in the game. In D&D, you take on the role of an adventurer, someone who is out to explore the world, search for lost treasures, and uncover ancient secrets. When deciding what kind of character you want to play, the 2 categories you want to consider is your character's race and their class. There are quite a few choices in D&D, but for this video, I'm going to focus on just the core races and classes. If you're a fan of the fantasy genre, you are probably already familiar with the core races in D&D, which are humans, elves, dwarves, and halflings. The Player's Handbook defines how the race works in regards to game terms. The most common race in the game world is humanity. As a new player, it is frequently easier to start off playing a human character as it is most relatable. In the game, humans frequently start off with more skills or possibly better ability scores than other races. Elves in D&D can have a variety of traits depending on the sub-race. The most common elf encountered is the High Elf, but all elves share certain traits. They are frequently slender and graceful, usually having high dexterity scores. They are slightly shorter than human and appear hauntingly beautiful with their chiseled features and grace. Elves are also extremely long-lived and can live hundreds of years. Elves have exceptionally keen senses and can see quite well, even in the dark. Conversely, dwarves are short and stocky and exceptionally sturdy. Dwarves can live for hundreds of years, but not as long as elves do. Still, they have long memories and keep to grudges quite easily. They live in clans under mountains and enjoy mining and the search for wealth. They are known for their loyalty, but also their stubbornness and strong sense of justice. In the game, they frequently can take the most damage in combat and recover quickly from blows that would fell others. Lastly, there are the halflings. If you've read Tolkien, then you know what a hobbit is, though in your DM's game world, they probably go by a different name. Since they are half the height of humans, they are frequently just called halflings. Halflings tend to be quite practical and prefer simple pleasures like a good drink of ale and fine pipe weed. They are generally kind but curious folk and entered the adventuring career out of the desire to see new things. In the game, halflings frequently have the best dexterity and are quite nimble. In Dungeons & Dragons, there are also a variety of careers you can take as an adventurer. In this video, I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I'm going to focus on the 4 common fantasy archetypes: fighter, rogue, wizard, and cleric. The most common type of adventurer is the fighter. In most fantasy worlds, there is no shortage of wars and conflicts. Fighter weapons and armor are quite common, and if a person has an aptitude for combat, no shortage of people to train from. In the game, fighters can use almost all weapons and wear the best armor. They hit for the most damage and can take the most punishment. No adventuring party is complete without a fighter in the front lines, laying waste to the variety of nasties you are likely to uncover in the deep, dark places of the world. Another common character that people encounter is the rogue. Unlike the fighter, rogues tend to keep to the shadows, wearing light armor and depending on their stealth and agility to allow them to get the upper hand on their foes. Rogues also tend to have the most skills of the other classes, and in big cities frequently make their living as burglars, cut-purses, and assassins. In the game, rogues are usually the ones to spot hidden dangers, disarm deadly traps, and pick the locks of tomb doors. The D&D universe is known for its magic, so what would an adventuring party be without a wizard? Able to mold the fundamental forces of the universe, wizards are the artillery and prime wielders of magic and the arcane. Relatively weak in the beginning, not skilled in the use of most weapons and armor, they need the protection of the fighter so they can cast their deadly spells, but in time, they can progress to be extremely powerful. In the game, wizards tend to hang back, behind the fighters, and lob spells at their enemies from afar. They are also good at aiding their allies with protection spells, or those that make others more effective in combat. Lastly, there is the cleric. Clerics are holy people and venerate some powerful deity or ethos. Unlike the wizard, that must study for years, read dusty old tomes. Through the veneration of their deity, they are granted their spells. Their power comes from the divine, not the arcane. While their spells are not as effective as the wizards, clerics are also frequently as well armored as the fighter and can wield most weapons with some skill. In the game, clerics frequently take the role of healers as well as warriors and inspire their allies with spells that hinder their foes and aid their friends. Now that you have some idea of what it is that comprises a character in the D&D world, I'm going to briefly walk you through the character creation process. For this example, we are going to create a human fighter. This type of character is great for those learning the game, as the role is relatively a straightforward one. Hold the sword, pointy end, towards the enemy. I will also be referencing the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons handbook during this example, but keep in mind, if you're using the starter set, then the characters are already created, and if you are learning from someone else, they will be helping you along. So, don't be intimidated by the rules. As I mentioned earlier, there are several methods for generating your character's ability scores, but in this example, we are going to use what is called the standard array. Basically, you just take a set of pre-generated numbers and arrange them how you would like them based on the profession you choose, and then apply modifiers for race. The standard array of scores is 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. For our fighter, we are going to arrange them as follows. As a human, according to page 31 of the Player's Handbook, we get to add +1 to each ability score. So now our fighter's abilities look like this. The ability scores generate certain bonuses or additions to die rolls. Don't worry about when they apply right now, but what we will do is make a note of them on the character sheet for reference later. On page 13 of the Player's Handbook, there is a chart that shows us what these bonuses are. And when we apply the bonuses, they look like this. All this information we are going to write down on a piece of paper called a character sheet. There are blank character sheets available for printing specifically for Dungeons & Dragons, but it is not required. You could just use a notepad if you wanted to, but with the availability of printers and PDF copies made available from Wizards of the Coast website, most people just print out the character sheet. Now, as we look at the scores, we can see our hero's dexterity is a bit low, but for our purposes, this is okay. We are going to rely on heavy armor in combat for protection rather than agility. The high constitution means we will be tougher to kill. The high wisdom means we will also be rather perceptive of our surroundings, and the high charisma means that our fighter will be confident, possibly a good leader, and perhaps a good spokesperson for the rest of the group. Next, we turn to page 70 of the Player's Handbook, and here we find the rules on fighters. In the game, characters progress by gaining experience points, granted by the Dungeon Master. As a beginning character, you start off at first level. After so many adventures, you gain enough experience, you can move up in level. The rules on fighters tell you what happens at each new level and how you improve. For now, we are just going to worry about our first adventure. So, we can see that at first level, we have a proficiency bonus of +2. Don't worry about what that means right now. I'll explain all of that in part 3 of this series, the rules. For now, we'll just make a note of it on the character sheet. Looking on page 71, we see that fighters get to use 10-sided dice to generate their hit points. Hit points are a measure of how much damage your character can take before she dies. However, rather than roll at first level, you get to just take the maximum of 10 hit points. In addition, you get to add the bonus for your constitution to that as well, which in our case is +2 due to our score of 15, for a total of 12 hit points. We will also note that as a fighter, the character gains proficiency in all armor and shields, as well as simple and martial weapons. When making saving throws, the fighter gains a proficiency bonus when making strength and constitution saves. A saving throw is simply a d20 die roll against a difficulty number, usually to avoid some in-game effect, such as dragon breath, a magic wand, or a trap. The DM will tell you what ability to roll against when this happens. We also get to choose 2 skills with which we have proficiency. What this means is that when we make an ability check and this skill applies, we can use our proficiency bonus. At this point, we are going to choose Athletics and Perception. Athletics lets me use my proficiency bonus when attempting such actions as climbing or jumping, and Perception lets me use my proficiency bonus when I'm trying to spot something or get an idea of my surroundings. There is also Passive Perception, no die roll required, that measures my character's general alertness. The score is 10 plus my wisdom bonus plus my proficiency bonus, which in this case the total is 13. I note this in the appropriate place on the character sheet. Next, we will choose a fighting style for our fighter. On page 72, there are 5 fighting styles listed: archery, defense, dueling, great weapon fighting, protection, and 2-weapon fighting. In this case, we are going to choose the defense fighting style as it gives us a +1 bonus to our armor class. Armor class is simply a measure of how hard you are to hit in combat. The higher the number, the better. We also note on our character sheet that at first level, we have the Second Wind ability, which allows us to regain lost hit points right in the middle of battle. Very useful for a character that will be the primary frontline combatant in play. As the fighter goes up in level, she will gain other such abilities, but we won't worry about those right now. But if you are a new player, you will probably want to read the section on fighters at some point before you get enough experience points to move up in level. The next step is determining your character's background. This is totally up to your imagination, but it does have in-game effects, primarily by giving you proficiency in 2 more skills. You can really have a lot of fun with this, and you and your DM work together to create a fun background you want to play, but also fits within the confines of the DM's campaign world. Starting on page 125 of the Player's Handbook is a whole list of pre-generated backgrounds to choose from, and since we are new to the game, we're just going to pick one of those, in this case, the Noble background. Note that the benefit of this background is proficiency in the history and persuasion skills, proficiency in a tool, a gaming set, a language of my choice, as well as a set of fine clothes, a signet ring, a scroll of pedigree, and a bonus 25 gold pieces to start the game. My character is one of privilege and has some advantages when dealing with other nobility in society, which certainly will affect how I roleplay my character and how other in-game or non-player characters will react to me. There are also 4 characteristics for me to choose from: a personality trait, an ideal, a bond, and a flaw. These are listed as a random die roll, but you can just choose one. In addition, don't be afraid to alter the descriptions a bit to suit your tastes. Go ahead and add these to the character sheet in the space provided. And as we look, we can see I've altered the personality trait for the noble in the first section. It says, I'm not afraid to use flattery or guile to get my way. I'm also not afraid to wade into the thick of the action and use my battle axe to negotiate for me. Sounds like fun. This character has ideals. Responsibility. It is the duty of a noble to protect the common people, not bully them. And then some bonds. My great axe is a family heirloom, and it's by far my most precious possession. And then finally a flaw. I have a hard time resisting the allure of wealth, especially gold. Wealth can help me restore my legacy. So there's some interesting backgrounds that the DM can use to introduce into the storyline and the campaign, and also some hints to the player on how to react in a variety of situations that may happen in-game based on their character information. So now we have a role-playing starting base, and we can move on from there. Now comes some fun. We're going to go shopping. It's time to outfit the new character with some equipment: weapons, armor, backpacks to carry survival gear, sacks to carry gold, pouches for carrying food, and so on. On page 143, it says that fighters start the game with 5d4 times 10 gold pieces, or they roll 5 four-sided dice, add them all together, and multiply by 10. Note also that as a noble character, I get to add 25 gold pieces to that total. The next several pages list items typically available to characters: armor, weapons, and so on, and their cost in gold. Be sure to deduct your purchases from your total and add what you buy to the character sheet. For armor, found on a chart on page 143, we are going to choose Chainmail, which gives the character a base armor class of 16, and due to our fighting style of defense, we get a +1 bonus to this for a total of 17. This means that when a creature attacks, they have to roll a 17 or better on a 20-sided die. We add this information to the character sheet in the space provided. For weapons, we choose a Great Axe, skewing the use of a shield in favor of dealing out lots of damage, as a Great Axe needs to be wielded with 2 hands. A Great Axe does 1d12 points of damage plus our strength bonus, which in this case is +3. We also purchase a Javelin as a throwing weapon. We add the information from the weapons charts on page 149 on these weapons to our character sheet as well. In addition, we get a backpack, some rations, a blanket, a tinderbox to light some fires, a water skin, which we also note on the character sheet, in addition to the equipment we got as a part of our noble background. Lastly, it's time to name our character. In this case, the player likes the idea of a strong female character with a Norse-type background. The DM tells the player that there is a civilization far to the north where the game will be starting called the Northern Reaches, and after a bit of discussion, decides that she is from Ostland. After a bit of internet searching for appropriate names, our player names her character Brenna Thorgood, and notes that on her character sheet as well. At this point, the character is ready for her first adventure, which we'll take a look at in part 4 of this series, the demonstration. But before we do that, we are going to take a brief overview of the basic game rules in part 3 of this series, the rules. So please look for those additions. I promise not to take as long to get to those parts as I did this one. Please leave your comments below, like, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful and entertaining. And as always, my friend, may your D20 roll true, and game on.